All righty. Welcome. Hello. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, serving information entrepreneurs throughout the US and the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I'm super excited to bring you my new friend, Jeremy Pope. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited you're here. You know, when we first connected, I just remember so enjoying our conversation. And there's
Mm.
a lot of overlaps, both in the folks that we serve and I think in the way that we think about certain things and think about certain topics. So this will be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to digging into your expertise and your particular flavor of your expertise. I think this will be really fun for our audience.
I'll tell you, I'll warn you ahead of time. I have way more flavor than I have expertise. Just FYI.
This is good. This is why we get along.
All right.
So, for those of you that don't know Jeremy Pope is a former clinical and stage hypnotist who now helps entrepreneurs build scalable, high-ticket sales departments.
True.
He's been a top salesperson, sales manager, and sales trainer for international businesses, including the direct marketing giant Guthrie Ranker. Now he and his team at Sales Call Overhaul, I love the name, by the way,
Thank
help
you.
build high ticket sales departments and help smaller businesses repair broken sales methods. You can join their free Facebook community at salescalloverhaul.com/join. Jeremy, welcome. Jeremy joins us today from the other coast. I'm in Seattle and Jeremy is in North Carolina.
hmm It's a good
How's
spot.
Yeah, it sounds
I'm
like
I'm here in
it.
the mountains of North Carolina, so I have I think 200 waterfalls within 2 hour drive of me. It's
Wow.
amazing. It's so beautiful.
Well, and before we went live, I was commenting on his artwork behind him, and he was telling me that he lives near a lot of waterfalls. So it's fabulous. I've heard beautiful things about North Carolina, have never been. So one of these days, my husband actually went to school out there, but he's threatened many a time to take me back there with him and travel around for a bit. So I'm looking forward to it.
Nice. Yeah.
So, Jeremy, talk to us a little bit about your roots in hypnotism. I'm so curious. We were talking and I just don't think I've ever had a hypnotist yet on the show. Tell me how you got
Okay.
into that.
Well, oh goodness, I got into it because I was shiftless and a lazy bum and various other things like that. But I was having memory trouble, and this was age
Mm,
21, something like
mhm.
that. And so I was looking for something to improve my memory. I was forgetting where I was putting things and stuff like that. Undiagnosed ADHD turns out to be what was going on there. So I uh, I started looking for ways to deal with this, and self hypnosis kept coming up over and over. And so I started doing that. 4 days in, I was not forgetting where I put anything anymore. And so I started saying, well, what else can I use this for? And so I started using it for a bunch of other stuff for myself and started going, well, if I do it for myself, then could I do this for other people too? And so I did. And that's what got me into hypnosis. I was well, I am an NLP practitioner. That was the
Mhm,
first style that I ever trained in.
mhm.
And yeah, that's
That's
where I learned how to sell as well, being a
wow.
hypnotist. So I learned
So
how
I'm
to sell.
curious how you went from memory issues, right? And I have a couple of ADHD people in my house, so I know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
How with that issue you connected the dots to hypnotism? What introduced you to hypnotism?
Oh goodness, Google searches.
Google.
Yeah,
Okay.
this was 2000, 2001.
Okay.
And so yeah, I was just looking anywhere I could find for
Yeah.
that. So it was
Oh, that's fascinating.
yeah, yeah.
Are there people that hypnotism doesn't work on?
Um, People who can't learn
Mm,
can't be hypnotized. So if there's a learning disability that is deep enough that you just really can't learn something new, then it's a pretty safe bet that you just really can't be hypnotized either. I have kind of an
Mm,
unusual take on that hypnosis is learning, not data input, but learn like
mm-hmm.
skill learning, true learning, and that learning is hypnosis, which is not what most hypnotists will tell you. Everybody's got their
Mm-hmm.
own opinions in that realm, but I feel pretty strongly about that. And so I found that people who are in a good mental place to be able to learn effectively and to learn skills effectively, they tend to be in the best place to be hypnotized as well.
Oh, interesting. So I have just as a disclaimer, I have very little experience with hypnotism, but the
Uh-huh.
ones that I had were profound. I went to a presentation of all places at the high school where I grew up, and
Hmm.
they had a hypnotist on stage that, and I don't know how this works, like audience versus like one-on-one services, right? So maybe there's a big distinction between
I've
those.
done both.
You've
Yeah.
done both? Yeah.
Hmm.
So there was, I can't remember who it was they pulled out of the audience, but it was one of these extreme body scenarios where like the person was hypnotized and they could be flat as a board with their head, just their head on one chair and their heels on another. And
Yep.
like the number of times I've thought back on that example, and then somebody stood on their stomach and they stayed flat as a board. And it was
Yep.
insane. Like as a for me growing up, I was an athlete, I was in weight training, right? I did all of these things and
Hmm.
I held a bunch of weight records. And I remember thinking, how is this possible? Like I remember literally trying it, trying to put my head on a
Oh
chair and
yeah.
you know what I mean, after the
Yep.
fact. And so one, that image has always stayed with me, like how profoundly, and there were other parts of that demonstration that were really significant, but I
Hmm.
remember thinking like, wow, super impactful, and it obviously works on some people. The funniest thing about that demonstration was they brought a teacher up on stage, and before he was hypnotized they asked him to sing like Blue Suede Shoes, like an Elvis Presley song, and he was like, no, I don't even know that song,
Hmm.
and was like really super resistant. And then they hypnotized him and then told him to sing Blue Suede, and he sang the entire,
Belted it out.
he
Yep.
belted it out word for word.
Right.
So, there have been some funny things like that I've seen over the years where I'm
Mhm.
like, there is something there. I don't know a lot about hypnotism, but I know that it's powerful.
Right. Right.
What did you see as you got into it and started taking this like to your clients, right? You did this as part of your work. What did you see in, excuse me, in your work as a hypnotist?
Well, I saw a lot of things. I've done the stage hypnosis shows like that, and they're a lot of fun. Um, I've never done the let's create back problems for someone trick with the chair and the head and the feet, because I have heard that there's so many rumors in the hypnosis world. It's there's no governing body or anything like, and then no central database of information either. So there's a lot of guessing going on. Back before YouTube, YouTube is
Yes.
the best learning tool since the book.
Yes.
For things you can't get from a book, YouTube is it. So there are a lot of good hypnotists out there these days. But the I did an awful lot of fun things on stage and with clients to create some drama in the room so that they could believe in themselves and believe in the process and etc. So I've one of the big things that I found was that all persuasion is the same. Persuasion is coaching, is motivation, is influence, is sales, is relationships, is it's it occupies a different space on that spectrum, but it's all kind of the same. And so just being willing to access the principles that get somebody to move off of zero in coaching can be very effective for the same thing in sales.
Mm,
And so there are a lot of I teach people what I call well, let me back up a second. There are a lot of givers stuck in a taker process or using a taker process.
mm,
And so when they move to a giver process, they can immediately be at home with themselves and they're immediately going to sell better just because they're more integrated now. And then the process itself it tends to work better also, and so they get an even a double bump in their close rate, things like that.
Mm,
But moving people toward integration, um, that's been kind of the big lesson for me, whether it's in sales or in motivation or in coaching or hypnosis. Uh, the big five that the big five topics that ended up coming up more than anything else were weight loss, stop smoking, asthma, allergies, chronic pain, and phobias. That was 90% of my business as a hypnotist. And
mm,
then I would occasionally get the like uh, dental surgery, like come into the dentist and stop the bleeding because this person can't do anesthesia, or do hypnotic anesthesia and stop the bleeding and the salivation for the dentist. So
wow.
yeah, the mind really ties into the body a lot deeper than a lot of we Westerners give it credit for, you know? So there was always the weird fun stuff, but um, the big stuff was just, who do people want to be?
Mm,
And helping them shift their identity in ways that support their ecology, and helping make sure they change their ecology, their ecosystem around them to support that new identity, and etc. So it's the same thing in sales. Um,
yeah. Well, I love the topic, first of all, of integration. And
mm,
although I think I know what you're talking about, for folks that are listening, will you describe what you mean when you say a lot of givers are stuck in a taker's
yeah,
process or paradigm or whatever?
there's a lot of high pressure sales processes out there. And I've worked for a couple of people that use those high pressure sales processes. Uh, there are there are an awful lot of small entrepreneurs that go through a coaching program, and I have seen the exact same sales script in over 3 dozen different coaching programs now. I've helped build out hundreds of funnels, and I mean so many sales processes, and a lot of seven-figure businesses and stuff like that. But we see very consistently people just grabbing piecemeal stuff that they've seen before. And maybe it's from their current coach. Maybe they liked something they saw on Facebook and added it to what their current coach does, etc. But you're not your coach. And you may not even jive with your coach's values sometimes. Hopefully you do, but I know a lot of people have been through coaching programs that it was a very different value system. And so there's some accidental toxicity there, with people who have no intent to be toxic. They just don't know any better. And any specialized field will have this effect going on. Um, Building inspectors will say, well, why would anyone do that to their building? It's like, okay, some of the stuff is not common sense. It's not just intuitive.
Mm,
But after a while, it feels like it ought to be, right? So we have to make sure that experts in a field, um, we're being kind to the people that are newer to this and maybe doing some naive things, or
mhm.
some very condescending things just out of their own innocence because they don't know any better. So removing condescension and removing hyper authority frames, removing mm, well, those are really a couple of the big ones. Removing ambushes from the sales process. That's a big part of what I like to do.
Mm,
I have a firm no ambushes policy with marketing, sales, motivation, team leadership, etc. When we're collaborating, when we are working together, when we're dancing together, we telegraph our moves to our partner. Like, you apply pressure to the shoulder or the back or whatever you're
mm,
doing to let them know what you're going to do next, and so they can follow with you, and there's skill involved in collaborating.
mm,
Most of the sales calls, the scripting that I see from TF, from ClickFunnels, from the clients on demand, from high end client, from there's so many programs that have used this kind of thing in the past, and I don't really keep up with it anymore. But
mm.
hopefully they don't anymore. But there's so many of these things where you hold on to the price, you keep it tight until the end, you build value, you twist the knife, you do whatever metaphor you use, and then you sock it to them at the end. It's $8,000. And then you shut up and the first person to talk loses. What is that? What is that? We're not here to play poker with people.
No.
We're not here to box with people. We're not getting in the ring with them. If you want someone to be confused and paralyzed, keep them in the dark about what happens next. It's the perfect way to create confusion and paralysis. And that's why poker players keep the other players in the dark. It's why a boxer or an MMA fighter tries not to telegraph their moves, is because they want their opponent to be confused and paralyzed and indecisive. It's perfect. But when we're collaborating, when we want someone to make a healthy adult decision that is good for their own growth and that is a good foundation for a relationship, we need to telegraph. It is the exact opposite of what most people are taught to do. And it creates a remarkable difference in the pressure in the call itself, the buyer's remorse immediately afterwards, and then the refund and chargeback rate over time. It's a huge difference all along.
I love how you spelled that out and how you so clearly illustrated what, unfortunately, I think so many people listening can relate to as
I could too.
Right. So much the norm. Yeah. So much the norm. And yet I think even when, I won't say everybody, but even when certain people are doing it, I agree so much with what you said about, like, they just don't know better.
Right.
They're being told by somebody that they perceive as an expert, here's how you do it. Right. But the other point that you made that I really love is about removing condescension and hyper authority frames. It's and it's something that is like sitting here as an expert, right? I have to be like, oh, reflect on times, because I get upset more often than I like to admit about how frequently people take each other's online content, take each other's IP, right? I live in the IP world. I keep thinking one day everybody on the internet's going to wake up and have personal ethics, right?
Right.
And I have to remind myself this piece that you said about some of them, it really truly does come from a place of not knowing. It's not all intentional bad behavior. And I know this to be true because I've done a whole bunch of work of, like, issuing, communications that say, please take that down or whatever. And a certain percentage, not all, but a certain percentage of the good guys have said, oh, you're right. I didn't even realize.
It wakes them up.
I didn't even realize that was a problem. Let me pay you for this work. Let me, like, they care about making it right. And then I have to, it really softens me when I see that, like, oh, like, I just assumed that they would know that that was not the right thing to do. But by showing their willingness to take responsibility and immediately go, oh yeah, you're right. I didn't think about those legal terms actually belonging to somebody, like one of my clients who paid for them, right?
Yep.
But it is a really important point that we go farther if we can soften, if we can do these things without condescension, without this authority frame that is so often taught, and have more of, like, I love your word of collaboration, even in the sales process, right?
There are a lot of sales processes that are the bro marketer. It's a very patronizing kind of process. Patronizing means when somebody talks down to you, Heather.
I'm so glad you clarified.
It's one of my favorite jokes.
Oh my gosh.
Ever.
It's so funny.
Thank you.
And for people that are not seeing the video, you really need to pop over to YouTube and watch the video for that portion.
um, so okay, mansplaining moment over.
Right.
But when we have a patronizing process, a lot of times our intentions can't shine through.
Mhm.
So can I give a couple of examples? Because
Totally.
okay, um, I've set up a lot of Facebook ad to register for an auto webinar or podcast VSL kind of thing, a VSL, and then uh, book a strategy call at the end of that. Get some reminders, apply for the strategy call, like fill out a questionnaire, and then get on the strategy call. I've built more of that kind of funnel overall
Yes.
than pretty much anything else, maybe half. And so I've seen many, many, many application questions that are just ripped from somebody else's program with no thought behind it. So there are a lot of these a lot of these coaches that are building their first funnel or their first successful funnel or something along those lines. They have been through a coaching program that is in the biz op space, the make money online space or biz op space. That's where a lot of the coaching happens, and that's okay. But the biz op space, there are it's designed to speak to newer people in the business.
Yes.
And so there is some level of parental attitude, kind of a look, step by step, this, and this. It's designed to hold people highly accountable, even when it works well. It's designed to hold people highly accountable. And when it doesn't work well, it just kind of leaves you to your own devices.
Right.
So a lot of the sales processes are set up around a really big idea around accountability. Like now I've committed to showing up for you. Will you commit to showing up for your call? Things like that.
Yes. Yes.
And that can be appropriate in the biz op space sometimes. It depends on your audience. You have to listen to your audience. But when you take that kind of thing from your biz op coach and move it into the legal world, for instance, or you're dealing with doctors' retirement funds, or you're dealing with just other types of business problems entirely, it's very rare that your prospects in that realm are going to put up with the same kind of language.
Right.
You just can't talk to people like children.
No, and it's right. It's why what you said rings so true about that particular space. And I love that you've just called it the biz op space because I haven't thought of it in that way, and that's exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they're not speaking to true experts, right?
Right. A lot of times their avatar is someone who is trying to become an expert and
Yes.
sometimes even trying to shortcut that process of becoming an expert or acting like an expert. And so they've learned to tune their marketing to that person. So even if you are an expert and you've been through that funnel, if that's what you've been acclimated to, you think that's normal. And it's not. It's not. It's only normal in the biz op space. So that's a really easy example.
Yeah. But I love it because the thing that is so enjoyable to see for me in the entrepreneurial space, and I love business. I could talk business all day. It's so much fun.
I'm
But
so
when
boring I can't do parties. I just can't.
can't do parties.
No, I'm too boring. I nerd out on business.
Right, right. I'm
Mhm.
there with you. We'd be over in the corner chatting business.
Right.
So, but is when you see somebody totally defying all of the like, you have to do it this way and you have to build it in this order. And you know what I mean? Because true experts understand some of what you've already said, which is that, it needs to fit for them, it needs to fit for their clients. It needs to be a collaboration, a conversation, like none of this overarching framework or structure that gets placed on so many people trying to build a business.
Yeah. The- a good friend of mine, Jason Canigan, he's an ops consultant and all kinds of cool stuff. But he talks about the one right way syndrome and
Yes.
how everybody wants the one answer that will solve it. And it's a big flag for a newbie in this area. If somebody's looking for the one right way, you know they don't have much experience in that thing they're asking about. And
Yeah.
it's okay, but if you're dealing with experts, you're going to have to open things up a little bit more. You're going to have to like display a little more of the toolbox, um, without overwhelming people with technical jargon, of course.
Totally, totally. So moving us back, I want to get back to the sales conversation, right? And how we do it better. And I love one of the things that I noticed in your information is if you're like most salespeople, you don't know how to actually properly pay attention to a
Oh,
prospect, right? And I think as a hypnotist, you probably have certain thoughts about this and how we get it wrong. Do you mind sharing?
I do not. Um, it would be unlucky if I did mind sharing coming on the podcast, wouldn't it? Yes. So I am putting together a game called the $1 Million Ear, and it's around this exact idea. We're going to be playing the game in the Sales Call Overhaul group, um, the first 2 weeks of every month, pretty much. So people can come in and join and play the game. But the $1 Million Ear is about how to listen. And I learned how to selling hypnosis packages, but not because I was hypnotizing people. Not any more than any salesperson does, If hypnosis works that way, I would never tell anyone I was a hypnotist. That would be my little secret,
Hilarious.
So having the ability to listen properly is what sales is about to me personally. And not everybody does that, and there are a lot of different ways to sell, but this way works for me. I spend it's a pretty average amount of time listening, as most good salespeople do. I'll spend about 55 to 60% of my time listening.
Mhm.
It's pretty consistent with enterprise sales, with consumer sales, with any kind of consultative selling where you're in the high ticket realm. High ticket for consumer being, to me, more than a third of what this person would pay for a car.
Right.
That's high
Right.
ticket for that audience, is how I define it.
Yep.
So enough to be a significant decision for this person. So when we learn how to listen, there are a few things that are very simple to start noticing. One is, and this is straight NLP here. And we didn't really talk about that. We can.
Let's definitely touch on
Okay.
NLP because this is a topic that I feel like is really important. People know where it fits because you can have people that really push and want to do it, and then others that are turned off by it that are worried, like, is this manipulative? Does this feel, you know what I mean? Is it secretly like hypnotism?
Right.
I don't want to do that.
Exactly.
So let's definitely touch on that.
Okay. Here's how you do it right. Because NLP is a bag of tricks. It's a bag of tools. That's all it is. It's a few dozen techniques that are commonly taught, and you can use them ethically and you can use them unethically. You can use them ethically from stage. You can use them unethically from stage. Things like that.
And I love that you just said that. You can use them ethically. You can use them unethically.
Oh yeah. I've found that the people who try and use NLP as a mental framework or as a philosophy or like the overarching psychology of what they're doing often get it wrong because it is not an ethical framework. It is a hammer and a few wrenches and some screwdrivers and things like that. And so, yeah, you can use it. I mean, anything powerful, you can use it wrong and you can use it right. You can use it well and you can use it poorly. Most of the time it gets used poorly and wrong. So there are some very simple things that you can do to use NLP well. And so let's talk about VAK, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. When you hear what someone is doing in their own heads, why would you ever try and get them to do something different just to please you, just to satisfy you, just so that you could be comfortable on your end of the Zoom chat? If you've got someone that speaks broken English in front of you and you happen to speak fluent Spanish, A, I'm jealous, but B, why would you ever force them to speak English when you're
Right.
not going to get the full meeting of the minds there, the consensus ad item there? When you have a language where you know they speak their language perfectly, and they always do. Everybody always speaks their own internal language perfectly, and they don't speak your internal language at all. Not unless they just happen to have the exact same way of building their brain that you happen to have over your many years. So when you have the ability to speak their language with them, do so. This is the kindest thing that you can do with people. So visual, auditory, kinesthetic is one very simple thing you can pay attention to. Are they talking about clarity? Are they talking about seeing the 30,000-foot view, the bird's eye view? Are they talking about height and depth? Are they talking about things like that? If so, I'm not going to talk about feeling stuck, or I'm not going to talk about, does that resonate with you? It's literally that simple.
Yeah.
When they're using soundy kind of words, and it's kind of hard to hear in an interview format because interview speaking structures kind of lend themselves to this more auditory format. But when someone is going into auditory, you can tell they like to hear themselves talk. They're thinking by talking. And so they often have kind of a musicality to their voice, a rhythm to their speaking.
Right. A syncopation or a, yes.
They tend to speak in long sentences and kind of flowing, and you can hear them kind of developing that idea as they talk because of the talking. And then they'll also use words like bells and resonance and does that sound right, and things like that. And then the kinesthetic people, well, let me go back to the visual people first. They'll use the visual metaphors for sure. And they'll often tend to speak very quickly and jump around a lot. They can jump big gaps because they can see from the airplane, they can see 50,000 feet or whatever.
Right.
So they can make that jump in one shot. And
it's like they just need to fill in little sections of the map. They already see it. They're going to go here and ask you this targeted question, or they'll go here and say this thing. Yeah.
So they jump around more. They feel a little more ADHD to some people. Visual people do. And then the auditory people, I've just described them. And then the kinesthetic people, they'll use words like feeling solid or feeling light. They'll talk about being blocked. Actually, being blocked is a good one. That could be visual or it could be kinesthetic. Either way. You have to dig into that metaphor a little bit more. What does it mean when you're blocked?
Yeah.
They'll tell you, well, I just have this roadblock up in front of me. So that's a visual thing. It's a ways in front of you. They might even make the motions like up in front of them. Or they'll say, well, I just can't move. Okay, that's a kinesthetic block right there.
Yeah.
That's if they're
a feeling block.
Yeah, if it's right up close to them, they're feeling it. So you can hear these things so easily if you just listen. And then the kinesthetic people, they also tend to wait a bit before speaking. They think more slowly, not more stupidly, just more slowly. They come across as more considered a lot of times. And it's very easy for a visual person like me to interrupt a kinesthetic person. So toward the beginning of a sales call, I tend to wait and see how long it takes someone to finish, and if they start talking again after I think they've finished. And then if they if they don't, then I'll just kind of match their pace.
Yeah.
But that's how you can tell the VAK stuff.
Mm,
People use these different things on different topics. So it's not, I am a visual person, I am an auditory
right.
person, I am kinesthetic. It's when I'm talking about this thing, I get really visual. When I'm talking
Totally.
about that thing, I get really auditory, etc. So that's one thing I love to pay attention to. Um, but when people are telling you their internal metaphors, they're giving you the handles on their brain.
Right.
They're asking you for help. So when someone says, I feel stuck, I'll say, well, tell me about that. What do you mean you feel stuck?
Mm,
And they'll describe it in more terms of metaphor. Well, I'm just in this hole, and I just can't climb out of the hole. It is as simple as saying something along the lines of, okay, well, if you had the ladder you wanted, what would be the rungs of that ladder? Was that complicated? What was that?
no, it's like
Yeah,
what you're pointing out, the fascinating part about this, and I so love that you, first of all, before you started, said that this can be done ethically, but it does really sound like it is just about being mindful and paying attention in ways that we don't normally do because we're just moving too fast or we're
right.
too busy or our brains are scattered. But like really being present,
Or because we don't know to listen for it.
right,
Yeah.
right. But it's like, you know, what you're saying overlaps so much. So, for example, there was a framework. I don't know if you know who Jane Powers is. She was on this podcast a while ago, but she teaches, and it's more like a kind of a personality type of description, but it influences the way they speak, the way they show
Right.
up. So, you know, whether you're talking to like an expert type or an
Mhm.
optimizer, somebody who's really organized and need things to be step by step by step, or a relator where they just need a lot of hand holding. They know that they need to know that they're going to be taken care of on the inside through
Yeah.
the process, right? Versus a catalyst that's like, look, I already know what I need to know. Like, let's just get busy, right?
Hmm.
Let's just get
Hmm.
started. And all of this you can tell from their language,
Right. Right.
right?
I love personality assessments, and I'm not familiar with that one, but
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like a good one. I might really enjoy meeting Jane. I might ask for an introduction.
Totally. But
Yeah.
it is, you know, when I was learning about it, I remember having that same thought that I asked you about, like, oh, is this a way to manipulate? And then I'm like, oh, no, it's just another lens that you layer over that helps you understand this person in a way that you can speak their language,
Right.
right? Like with your ladder analogy, you can meet them where they are.
Yeah. And you can make them feel very heard by
Mm,
speaking their language instead of insisting that they try and speak yours without even know. Like, it's two people that most of the time you don't know you're speaking different languages. You're just trying to muddle through with sign language or something. So when you're aware there are two different mental languages going on,
mm,
let's join them in their world. Let's speak their language. Let's migrate to their country for a little while here, and or visit their country, I guess, would be more
yeah.
accurate. But it's the same kind of thing. um, yes, you can use it to manipulate people, but that's more about the content of, like, are you helping someone make a healthy adult decision where
Hmm.
you believe it will grow them,
Yeah.
or are you pressuring them into something?
Mm.
Here's a very easy way to tell if you're being ethical. And it's not foolproof, but there's one flag that is very powerful. A lot of people use sales scripting or a scripted process in some way or another.
And one of the questions I was going to ask you is, does that get people in trouble? Right?
Oh, that's a big topic.
I'm sure it
A
is.
lot of times, yes. Let's
Mm.
get into that in a minute if we have time.
Totally. I want to respect your
Um,
time, but I'm glad you brought up scripting.
cool. I I believe that if you're using a script, you should get so good at it that you can ignore it and pay attention to the person in front of you. So you have to
Yes.
master it and move on. That's my overall take on that.
Well, I love it. And I think that for anybody who has ever been a speaker, they can relate exactly to what you're saying. Like, You have
Yep.
the framework, you know the content, you know the mile markers, and for
Right.
any given audience, you can deliver that in a different way at a different pace. You know what I mean? Be responsive to
Exactly.
the interactions and the questions of the audience. I think it's the same approach. But I love that.
Agreed. To finish out the last point, if I'm going to visit their country to be with them, yes, there is a potential for manipulation there, but I don't think are more powerful tools. That question, what's the phrase? You'll never know if you're good unless you're powerful. Something along those
Mm,
lines. Harmless is not the same thing as good.
no.
Harmless could just be ineffectual as well. And so there's there's a very easy way to tell if you're being ethical in your sales, or one very easy tell. Would you show your script on screen on Zoom as you use it? If
That's
you would be
such a
scared to
good
do that,
question.
right?
That's such a good question.
If you'd be scared to show them your script as you use it with them slash on them, then you've got a bad script. You've got
Yeah.
a very possibly unethical script, and it's time to
Mm,
rework that script.
double
So
underscore. Yes.
yeah.
So good.
Collaboration is about exposure, transparency, vulnerability,
Yes.
authenticity, building a relationship together, and instead of butting heads and like aiming your words at each other, you're pointed in the same direction. You're pulling the load of the problem. You're problem solving
Mm.
together with collaborative sales.
Well, and I love that you mentioned transparency in that process, because I do think in sales in particular, people think like, oh, they have to contain or somehow keep all this information on one side of the fence,
Trickery.
or
It's
right.
trickery.
But that transparency piece, like how significantly more powerfully do we show up, even if, and this is where, I think you have to really be originating from the right place in any conversation. Like, you're not there to make a sale, you're there to collaborate and find out, should you be working together, right? Which is why I'm really quick the second that I spot like, oh, I'm not the expert for this, I don't actually solve this particular problem, I will immediately let somebody know.
Yep.
It's not like I need to be the expert in all things related to online business or whatever, right? I think
Most people are closing at 14.5%. And this has held steady for 5 years in the online space in a funnel situation. The
got it.
average salesperson, just decent, good salesperson on a decent funnel, they're going to close at 14.5%. I've seen so much data around that.
Interesting.
But if you've got, goodness, I'm trying so hard to find that train of thought again. if, if you've got, oh no, I think it's
It's all
gone.
right.
I think
It's all
it's
right.
gone. But the transparent triple close that I
Yes.
talk about is it's almost all asking questions. And it's
Mm,
almost all asking questions deeply and doing things in a way that will give you access to healthy decisions together. Here's what it was. I remember what it was now. Yay. If you Wow. Nope. It's gone again. My goodness. Well, at least I have the diagnosis for ADHD
look,
these days.
look. But this is the perfect invitation for people to follow up with you, right?
Okay.
Because we
Yes.
are getting to the end of our time together.
Mm-hmm.
I love that we are ending on this topic of transparency, and what you just said about asking questions deeply to
Right.
see, right? I don't know that people train all that well on how to do that particular piece.
No, it's a missed skill.
Yes. Yes. So I think that is,
Oh, here it is.
yes.
If you call your call a clarity call and more than half of your people are leaving that call without clarity, you're lying to them. That's
Mm.
an easy game to play right there with ethics in sales. if you call your call a breakthrough call, a clarity call, an
Right.
insight
How many
call,
people do this?
right?
Yes.
If
Yeah.
they don't come away with actual clarity, you're doing it wrong. That's
Mm,
the easy tell right there.
yeah.
So if,
Well, and I will layer on what immediately comes to mind when you say that are
mhm,
people that are like containing all the secret sauce back here. You know what I mean? Like
yes,
you have to enroll first before I'm really going to help you with that. And
right.
it's like there's so much that we can do in regardless of the business and saying, here's the map, here's how we work, here's the order, here's the just like putting it out there.
Right.
So it's
It's
not a
not
mystery.
overwhelming people with jargon. It's not overwhelming
No.
people with technical overload. That's never going to sell. The world
Mm-mm.
of calculation is not the world of action. But if your people are coming away with clear next steps and they feel like
Mhm.
they can make a healthy decision around that, whether it's with you or not,
Right.
good job, folks. Good
That's
job.
awesome. Whether it's with you or not. I love that. So true. And it's really important for us in our businesses to recognize the or nots, to recognize, and free up our time for the ones that are absolutely the yeses. So so much good stuff. Jeremy, for folks that are thinking like, okay, I need to check this out. I want to find out what Jeremy does and how you serve your clients. Where do you send people? Where do you like to connect with folks online?
The Facebook group is the main
Mhm.
place. So go to salescalloverhaul.com/join.
Okay.
And that will get you into the Facebook group. You can play the $1,000,000 ear and learn how to listen. You can play it every month if you want to play it every month.
I love
And
that.
and you can submit your own recorded sales calls to win. We do not play it on the air. We anonymize it, we redact it, we transcribe it, and then I reenact the trouble spots using silly voices on the
Oh my
air.
gosh. I
So,
first of all, the like that was the exclamation mark to this conversation. I love that particular piece so much. My sister who's in sales, we joke because I'll get on the phone with her almost daily, like, Ash, how's your day going? And a couple of times she's been like, I was not the salesperson that I meant to be. I just
right.
talked too much on a call. Like she knows
Yep.
when she's done it. And let's
Yep.
be clear, she's a great salesperson. But
Mhm,
I
mhm.
love that your game is called the $1,000,000 ear. It's
That's the important part.
perfect. Yes.
Mhm.
Well, Jeremy, we will share your link to your Facebook group, anything else you want us to share at the show notes page. So folks, pop on over and visit us at legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. Jeremy, what final takeaway would you like to leave people with today?
Oh goodness, I think that's the one. Listening is selling.
Mm, yeah.
Listening in healthy ways will sell so much better than you think it will.
Well, I so appreciate you. I appreciate your approach to this conversation. I think there's a lot of ways that people step in potholes in this particular area of their business. And we
Mhm.
need people like you that are educating the marketplace in the right ways. So thank you for joining me today. I so appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I hope we get to connect again.
That sounds good to me.